Hi, Wenda. Nice to meet you and the rest of those who might watch the recording. Um, yeah, I will say that joining Accenture was probably one of the best decisions have ever made in my life. I had previously been in banking for 5 years, worked my way through school, and then a buddy moved to Cincinnati and we had a beer and he's like, man, you should come work at Accenture if you like to work on some pretty challenging world problems. So. Um, 6 years later, here I am, loving every minute of it. So really excited to kind of give you all a background on the company, and then also kind of what we do in our labs and our innovation centers. They're one of the fun, more interesting parts of Accenture because we do so much, but this is kind of the more cutting edge type of item. So usually I would start off just asking kind of who actually knows the Accenture, brand or has heard of Accenture. At least I know from my family members, they're like, what do you guys do? And the answer is, unfortunately, we do kind of everything, but we kind of purposely hide behind the scenes. So we're the 31st like most known brand or have the strongest brand in the world. But a lot of people outside of the business world don't really know about us. So if you were to then ask someone, okay, at Accenture, what do you do? This would kind of be like the placemat side, as they call it. So there's over 500,000 employees at Accenture. It's a pretty big place across the globe, and I would say the majority of what we do is really helping Fortune 2000, world governments, world organizations, states, federal governments, really help harness the power of technology and help them really drive digital capabilities in the cloud, around security, marketing. We have a kind of wide breadth of services that we have, but really we help clients do things that they can't always do themselves, and a lot of times it's powered by technology. So we've really focused on our single purpose as a company, which is to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. So I think what that really means, for at least for me, is, and I see this in a lot in our labs and our innovation studios, is that we're always focused on how does technology help empower human beings to make them greater than what they can be on their own. And so I think that in almost every single conversation that I have in my day-to-day is how are we really adding value to people and adding value to our clients? And value doesn't always mean the bottom line P&L revenue. Sometimes it can be how are we bringing services to people that might not have those to begin with? How are we thinking about sustainability and proper environmental controls when we're working with our clients? Whether it's in selling to individuals, whether no matter their geographic footprint or background, or how do we get materials and goods across the globe to where people need them. So the way we organize ourselves at Accenture is really within four major businesses. One is strategy and consulting. This is where I've sat the majority of my career. We really focus on the long-term 3 to 5 years out for our clients. How do they grow? How do they save money? How do they maybe pivot into new spaces of business? But then also, how do they use data science, what we call applied intelligence or artificial intelligence, machine learning? How do we potentially use new technologies that are emerging, blockchain, 5G technologies, edge computing? And then also really kind of think through what did their individual areas of their business need. It's not just about the whole organization. What did each of the individual silos or maybe brands within a company need? Within Interactive, that's what I would consider our marketing arm. So it's really around how do we help companies promote their marketing campaigns? How do we help them sell more, whether it's branding, whether it's TV spotlights? For instance, we own a few agencies, one of which actually was helping develop the dragon for Game of Thrones. What we actually did was take that same virtual technology and are now starting to apply it in marketing campaigns in virtual and augmented reality. So we took something from entertainment and we kind of took that technology and say, how can we scale it to a broader audience and availability with our clients? So we also still help with, how do you do campaign execution, social media, those types of activities, but really interactive. When you see that word, pardon me, think marketing. Technology is another area of our business. That's where actually I started my career. And this is anything around cloud, security, building new applications or SaaS solutions. My first project was pretty cool. It was actually helping build the Affordable Care Act implementation for the state of Ohio for Governor Kasich. So during the presidential campaign 4 years ago, or I guess 5 years ago, we were helping roll out the Medicaid overhaul program in the state of Ohio. And we had to actually build a custom system because nothing existed on the market. So that technology stack is anything infrastructure, platform, or just individual software solutions. And this is where we have a lot of our relationships with AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure. I could also give you alphabet soup of Workday, SAP, Oracle, kind of just can go through the whole list. We work with these organizations on a daily basis and is a large portion of our business. And then finally is operations. This is where we identify areas where part of empowering human beings to achieve their full potential is getting rid of the stuff that they find boring and mundane. So I always like to think back to like my checkbook. Like when I was in 3rd grade, someone taught me how to write a checkbook and balance a checkbook. I don't do that anymore. Mint.com does it all for me, right? And so it's not that balancing your checkbook isn't important. I just shouldn't have to be writing every entry into my notebook every single day. And so that's kind of how I think about this operations functions. There are things that our clients and businesses and people do every single day that they might actually not need to do. And how do we free up that brain power so that they can really think about the future or new ways to use technology or enter new marketplaces or be creative, or even just free up time to spend more time with their families, right? A lot of our clients are thinking about how do we get our people working less, but being better at the time they are at work, whether they're at home or in an office. So that's kind of what operations focus is, and really helps take those more mundane transactional costs and help them be more automated or operationalized in other parts of the world. So across all of these businesses, there are different industries have different needs. Healthcare doesn't have the same needs as oil and gas, doesn't have the same needs as consumer goods. So that's kind of like our business as a whole. I guess I can open it up for questions now, or we can kind of keep going and then we can open up for questions later. But feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions while I go. But I think that's kind of like the broad, like, what is Accenture? But I think there's some, if I'm a student, I'm coming and saying, okay, why is Accenture important to me? Like, it's cool, you do all that stuff, you're a big brand, you have a bunch of people, what does it mean for me? And I think if you really want to if you believe in our purpose and really want to get on the team, I think it's really important that you have a career here at Accenture. Like, we want people to be with us their entire career, and we're in so many different industries, technologies, businesses, that you can really move your way around Accenture and have a home. And we're going to invest in you, and we're going to support you. We invest almost $1 billion a year in training our people. And we are going to continue to do that into the future because we believe that our people are our most valuable asset. But we also understand that we can't build everything. So we are constantly acquiring new acquisitions and companies and helping our own people work alongside those acquisitions to make ourselves better and make new innovative products. And then finally, we invest a lot in R&D and research and our innovation networks, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I think if, these 3 big numbers, if anything, take away of, we are constantly investing to push forward, and we are constantly investing in our people. So innovation. As you saw across those 4 pillars, innovation is probably going to be required in all of this. And innovation, I think, is, being someone who runs an innovation studio, is heavily overused. And I sometimes think it's so big and broad that like even when you read books by like, for instance, How Google Works is a great book if you're a reader, but they talk about there's capital I innovation and there's small I innovation. Most companies do a lot of small I of innovation and it works. And so what we've done at Accenture is say, how do we blend the best of both worlds? How can we focus on big I innovation and small I innovation across all of our different businesses that we offer? And how do we help our clients? And so what we've built is we affectionately call it as the innovation network. So it really has 6 components. We have a whole research arm that is just focused on what's going on in the market, what's changing, and where do we think the future is kind of heading from more of an academic standpoint. That's before getting the real world business reality involved, but it's really understanding what's really observing the marketplace and what's going on. That also then is paired with our venture arm. We have a whole arm that is partnering with startups and companies across the globe to make sure that we're staying on the cutting edge and seeing what are the trends at the earliest stage companies and how do we bring that forward and that innovation and change faster. Once we kind of understand where the market's going, we also realize that you have to experiment and actually know what you're doing with these tools. So kind of what I'm talking about today is really Accenture Labs and the Accenture Studios. And really what the labs do is take brand new technology, think like Google Glass, for instance, and play with it in the laboratory, do a bunch of experiments on it and say, well, beyond what Google is doing for just people, how could we take this to another step? So to kind of give a great example of that, using Google Glass, one of the first lab experiments we did was helping a nuclear engineer navigate his way through a nuclear plant. And while he would go up to the door, the special unique code for him would appear in his eyes so he could access through the door. And it would take him exactly where he needed to go fix something and give him different instructions on how to remediate a problem in one of the different rooms of the facility based upon just all the different processes and knowledge that the company has in the potential problem. And so what they did was say, okay, we know we can start to build and take those things forward. And then they pass it off to the studios, and the studios are kind of what I run. And we say, okay, the technology's come out of the lab, it's feasible, we have a prototype. How do we make this real for our clients, right? Like we don't need that for every nuclear power plant, but maybe it's part of a server farm. Maybe it's something that Microsoft's interested or Amazon's interested. And how do we build a product, a software, hardware, and business product that AWS wants to be using those tools for their hardware engineers, because they might not have everything, or they might not want to have their computer in one hand while they're unplugging server cords in another. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today of what the labs and the studios do. And then once we kind of realize it's a reality and there's business needs, we pass it off to our innovation and delivery centers, and they really scale it for our clients. They really help them say, okay, if we get this going with 10 people, how do we scale it across the globe to all the data centers? So that's kind of how we see taking innovation forward. It's not just a matter of, hey, this is a great idea, let's spend $10 million to make it perfect. There's a lot of these little iterations and tweaking along the way, and where you may start with the prototype or even the idea may be somewhere totally different than where you land and what is actually adopted by the market. But that's kind of our challenge day in and day out, is to take in client problems and say, okay, how can we take prototypes, what's going on in the market, and make something that really helps change their business or the lives of their consumers. It doesn't always just stop with the companies themselves. A lot of times they come with, hey, my people have a problem, help us fix it. So I don't see any questions yet. So I think the proof is kind of like what you actually build. And so these innovation hubs started as very small little studios and have really expanded based on how successful they are working with our clients. So in the past few years, we've built over almost 8,000 patents or patents pending on new technologies. We actually have studios in over 45 countries. I think the total number is it's like 500 studios, all specializing in a different area of technology or expertise, whether it's the applied intelligence studio that I lead, that's data analytics and machine learning, or it's our Liquid Studios that does rapid software prototyping and like computer visioning. We have groups kind of doing a lot of different various studios, and I could spend hours talking about all their individual intricacies and stories. But I really want to kind of highlight that like we do this day in and day out, and we're professional innovators. And this is a legitimate career within Accenture. So as you saw, the strategy and consulting tower, the interactive tower in marketing, the technology and the operations tower, there's actually within there, kind of underneath that is innovation, or I guess it would sit atop it. And there's careers in all these different facets at Accenture. So I want to kind of make it also real for you. I know I was giving examples along the way, but this is actually a really cool one that the Accenture Lab did. So one of our clients came to us and said, hey, we want to reinvent how you think about the car, right? So a lot of people think of Tesla when they think of new cutting edge car companies. But what most people don't realize is that those car companies actually buy parts off the shelf from thousands of different vendors and just build them, put them, assemble them together in a way that's unique to them. Now, some of them may have customized items that they ask for, like for instance, Tesla did build their own screen, but one of those part manufacturers and suppliers actually came to Accenture and said, hey, using smart materials, 3D printing, and just analytics, how could we build smarter products and rethink how the car is built? And so we put a bunch of teams on the ground in our innovation centers and in the clients' warehouses, and we started to rebuild the car from the ground up using technology. So you always see in those fancy car commercials a guy like making a car out of clay, and like that still happens. But what this car company realized was that they also have a chance to influence the car manufacturers with the products that they offer to them. And so we actually help them re-engineer and build out their own prototype of a car with their own technology, really thinking of when cars become autonomous, or just moving forward in the future when people have all these IoT devices, how are they going to want to experience being in their car? They're going to want a more comfortable car seat. They're going to want to be able to see movies and videos in augmented reality if they're not driving the car. How are all the different devices going to connect to the car and the car be a giant router? So helping them build and think through all these different components is just one of the ways our labs help them. And not every idea is successful, right? So one or two of these were scaled to bigger projects and went live, but a lot of the technology was a good lesson to learn, and they took that to other areas of the organization. Questions, thoughts, comments?
Also, feel free to enter any questions you may have in the chat box, and then I will let Christian know that that they're there.
Great, perfect.
Christian, may I ask a question?
Of course, Barb.
So as you're talking about this in professional innovators, what kind of skills do you look for in an entry-level person coming into this organization that might join this group?
So unfortunately, the answer is it depends, right? So it depends on what the type of the innovation that we're working with. If you're passionate about hardware, there's some basic hardware skills you can get. A lot of our people are focused on software skills. There's also, we have a lot of creatives too that came from design school and they know Photoshop. It's actually kind of amazing how an idea in Photoshop created can help build an entire new product. So Barb, unfortunately the answer is like, it really depends on what's the problem, what does the client have, and also kind of what's your interest and expertise. If you're a statistics major or you're big in STEM, you'll want R and Python. Like those are two really core data science skills. If you're good at math, but you're not great, maybe you're a good visualizer and you understand the business dynamics that need to be going on and the messages that need to come out of the data. So maybe you're focusing on like things like Power BI, Tableau. Maybe that's helping you visualize how data flows and works in systems. Maybe you really like to do mock-ups of software systems. So there's different types of software tools that you can use to help with just application development mock-ups. I believe one's called Spark was the most recent one I was introduced to. So it unfortunately, Barbara, kind of depends. But I do think when you first enter Accenture, we do a really good job of understanding what do you want to do in your career, and how do we train you in those new skills and give you the time to learn, and then put you in a place to learn and develop those skill sets. Because I think we've come to realize that the change is happening so quickly with software and tools and just what business challenges are, that we're also changing our expectations necessarily of like, what are those core skills? Now, it's great to have some skills coming in, right? Like those tangible, a lot of software skills. But I do think just a curiosity and a willingness to learn far outweighs someone that comes in with like 2 years of like hardcore coding skills. I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's kind of my own perspective, having worked with team members. We can give them opportunities to learn things that aren't really publicly available, and they get those kind of opportunities just based on being eager and like wanting to get their hands dirty and jump in.
That's great to know. And I think you answered the question beautifully. You gave a lot of great examples. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So actually, that's actually a really good segue to the next example. Unfortunately, we can't really tell who this partner is, but they are extremely innovative company in the entertainment space. They're really known for their creativity, and we've actually created our own innovation, what we call the Studio Lab, that is on site in their production facilities. And it really helps them reimagine how people will go to the movies and experience movies on the big screen or even at home. And so when, I'm trying to watch my words carefully, but when you're experiencing a movie or some sort of entertainment or just entertainment product or experience in a store, that really takes a lot of time, energy, and effort. And so what our team members do is kind of show where technology is changing and where you could kind of bend the initial thought of what a piece of technology is supposed to do and how it could really recreate a consumer experience that you might not have thought of before. And so, for instance, where instead of putting 3D glasses on and watching a 3D movie, what maybe could you use the person's phone as a way to interact with the movie while it's going on, or in the theater? Or what's their experience from being at home watching a show that's also they're going to see the live production movie, and how is because they attended that movie, or that they watched the TV show, maybe their movie experience is a little bit different because we know they know more of the background, right? So maybe there's some cool call outs on the phone, but how do you do that without disturbing everyone else in the audience, right? So there's some crazy ideas we can kind of throw around with the clients in these spaces and say, we know you know cinema so much better than we do, but we know a lot of the technology changes that are going on, and let's like throw stuff on the wall and see what could work. And how could we, if we're right next to the director, 2 blocks away on the studio, how can we maybe throw those ideas around and maybe change the way we're filming the movie, or change the way we're going to brand the movie or market the movie? So that creativity is really important, because you don't want to just know, well, I know this software can do X. Well, great. What could it also do Y and Z, and something no one's ever thought of before? And our clients are really, that's like one of their biggest focus areas. They're saying, we want more innovative ideas. And I think one of the big pushes in our organization has been about diversity. And we find that the more diverse our teams are, whether not just gender diversity, but also socioeconomic diversity and racial diversity, it's a constant topic within our organization on, we're a very strong meritocracy-based company. And there's some really great ways we internally operate so that we look at people's merits, not on what people look like. But that diversity of thinking, the best projects I've been on are all where we have people from different backgrounds, different countries, because we can all give a truly different perspective on how we would use it, or how their families would use it, or how their cultures would use it. And then that really brings some new innovative ideas from the overlaps that a lot of times our clients don't always have. So I think the final example I have here, and I know I'm kind of going quick, but it's not just all about, I wouldn't call it easy problems. Those other problems were very technical in nature, but they were very customer facing. As I kind of see the patterns of the world moving, is that healthcare, especially science, math, and business, are being converged together faster than ever. And the use of machines, not just robotic machines for aren't like physical movements, but also mental processing, is exponentially increasing. And so one of the big areas we help advance is really around robotic surgeries, and also visibility into healthcare. Whether that, what I mean by visibility is, what are some of the social determinants of health? What are the impacts of COVID on different communities with different access to different educational levels, different wealth levels, different access to care? And then how does that actually impact the services that hospitals, retailers, insurance companies, governments are providing to those individuals? And how do we use technology, not just to bring equity and equality, but also to make sure that people are getting the right access of care, and they're getting the right care. One size doesn't really fit all in medicine, and we're going to see more and more of that become more customized. And one of the big things our labs and our research teams and our strategy teams are focused on are, how do we bring that the latest robotic technology with the most precision and accuracy for what the person needs treatment on. So one of the examples was working with our robotics manufacturers and a medical device company to really look at some new robotic surgery platforms where they could use different computers connected across the globe to really assist in surgeries from different locations, and also not just allow the doctor to work from different locations, but also how does the robot help assist the doctor and work around the doctor when he or she is performing surgery. So many people have heard of like Amazon. One of their big things is that the robotic arms move around the workers on the assembly line. Well, think about that same concept, but instead it's a doctor performing surgery on an individual, and the robot knowing when to move around to reduce the error or increase the precision on where the doctor needs to operate. So I think those are kind of three broader examples. But really, I think there's kind of this next wave of innovation. I think a lot of people have heard a lot about IoT. They've heard a lot about edge computing, or they're starting to hear more about edge computing. But some of the more things like AI, still early in the AI game, but it's become very widely, machine learning has become very widely known with things like TensorFlow, really bringing down the complexity required. There's a lot of no coding software out there that allows you to make machine learning algorithms without actually knowing how to code. Just coming up with a good idea and understanding that maybe some of the math is right, or having other machine learning software make sure that your machine learning is accurate. So there's been a lot of advances in those spaces. And so what we're seeing is, and also digital technology. Digital isn't new anymore. Your phone isn't necessarily a new thing. Your wearable isn't necessarily a new thing anymore. So as we see the future progressing, we see a lot more with extended reality. So what we mean by extended reality is anything that augments the reality of the world you live in, not just what you visually see, which we normally call virtual reality. There's different levels of this reality that are going to become augmented, whether it's stores that continuously have signs that change and morph based on you walking in the door, whether it's being able to see parts of the world through your phone or through another device without it actually changing, or something, you know, like an Oculus that is a fully immersive experience. Those are going to dramatically change and help bigger clients, some of our bigger clients, differentiate themselves from maybe some of the smaller niche players on Instagram that you might be buying your clothes from, or your favorite perfume or shampoo from. Quantum computing is an area I have a lot of passion in. This is kind of the next step for computing. Right now, it's still pretty basic. It's still in its infancy. But really what it does is, once you get a certain level of, you know, your qubit pattern right, it just speeds things up much more quickly. And so I think a lot of us think that computing power is very fast, but the bigger you get in the data sets and the complexity of those data sets and multiple scenarios beyond the initial scenario, quantum computing is really going to help speed through a lot of those solutions. So that's still a very early area, but it's something that we're heavily invested in, and are continuously kind of pushing that envelope and seeing when we can bring forward those innovations into the real world. And then blockchain. I think everyone has probably heard about cryptocurrency at this point, but there's so much more to the technology underpinning crypto, which is called blockchain. And the distributive ledger concept, how hashing can be used in different ways, not just for whether it's a currency exchange or even kind of like proving assets through NFTs. You also have massive checkpoints throughout and points of friction throughout transactions in the globe that can be eliminated by blockchain because everyone trusts the system. For instance, one of our examples, or one of the things we did, was we loaded a cargo ship full of a client's product that had to go through customs. And all we did was put an RFID chips into a blockchain system, and we sent that product off. And we integrated with a bunch of different maritime, port authorities, governments, passports, all tax agencies all across the globe, and delivered 13 different shipments to 13 different parts of the world without any human intervention, without any customs. And it was all done through blockchain because everyone on the blockchain trusted that the blockchain was accurate, and that when people put cargo off the ship, all the taxes were paid to the right people, and all the transactions of ownership occurred, and all the customs things were checked, and all that needed to be done was verify that that item was actually dropped off at port, which could easily be verified by a camera or an individual. So there's a lot more to blockchain than what you always hear in the media around cryptocurrency. So that's another technology that's going to fundamentally change how we as humans interact with the world around us. So that's really all I had. I wanted to leave some time for questions, comments, thoughts, but just also kind of just give up kind of our contact information. My door is always open for people who want to learn more. So that's my email at work. David Craig, he was actually on vacation, so I was like, hey man, you don't join, take your time off, your PTO is important. But he's actually head of the recruiting here and is a managing director in our St. Louis office. So he'll be able to, if you want to stay more local, he's kind of not only heading recruiting for St. Louis, but it can also kind of give you a tour around St. Louis. But if you want to maybe move to other cities, we have offices in almost every city on the planet, or major city on the planet. So I currently live in Chicago. So we really like to make people feel at home and kind of work from the places and cities that they want to work in. So I guess any questions, comments, thoughts?
Thank you, Christian. At this time, I'm going to stop recording and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Carl.